Development of Sonic 3 would take place in a separate section of the building, locked away from the rest via special security passes. This led to some. Yuji Naka came up with the idea of a small planet to run across after watching Dragon Ball.
Yep, there it is. And that's the most intriguing part, is seeing how they combated the complex problems. Okay. Splash wave.
The first two Sonic games brought Sega immense success. The character went in 2 short years, from a conceptual rough sketch to an icon more widely recognized by kids than Mickey Mouse. By the end of 1992, Sega started to maximize profit from the Blue Hedgehog, not only from all lucrative licensing deals, but also by starting development of multiple Sonic games for a wide variety of platforms.
Seen this video?
It was an exciting time for the company, prevailing on the cutting edge of consumer entertainment technology.
It's
Sega
telling
of
a story.
Japan had launched their fully 3D rendered arcade game, Virtual Racing, while Sega of America grew exponentially and opened up their high-tech multimedia studio geared towards the future of entertainment. But no success is without sacrifice. Sonic 2 had been developed by Sega's first US-based development studio, Sega Technical Institute. One of the core goals was to create a mixed culture creative work environment where anyone could pitch an original idea for a new game. But Sonic was just too important for Sega, and the continuation of his games was therefore given the highest priority. Many other projects were put on the back burner and even cancelled. Unsatisfied with the trajectory of his studio, Mark Cerny, head of STI, left in the tail end of 1992. The industry veteran Roger Hector was hired to fill his shoes. He was already acquainted with Sega from his days at Disney, and not wanting to stir things up, he stayed true to Mark Cerny's original vision as much as he could with the given situation. When Sonic 2 wrapped up, part of the Japanese staff returned back to Japan. Lead game designer Hirokazu Yasuhara and lead programmer Yuji Naka remained at STI and set their mind on the follow-up. They assembled an all-Japanese team and asked Sega of Japan to send in reinforcements, but being stretched thin themselves, Sega could only spare a few experienced members from their consumer division. They were forced to send a number of new recruits, but what they lacked in experience, they certainly made up in talent and creativity. Development of Sonic 3 would take place in a separate section of the building, locked away from the rest via special security passes. This led to some dismay from US graphic artists, who were eager to be continually involved in the franchise. However, there would still be some interaction with other STI employees. For example, Yuji Naka consulted technical programmer Adrian Stevens to help him solve complex math problems. Sonic 2 introduced 2-player gameplay to the series. The third installment was supposed to move the series into the 3D realm, codenamed Sonic 3D. To make this happen, they planned to add the Sega Virtual Processor to the cartridge, a lightning-fast chip that was born out of the desire to port their arcade hit Virtual Racing over to the Mega Drive. Yuji Naka and art director Kunitake Aoki worked on tech demos and mock-ups featuring a low-poly 3D rendered Sonic and isometric gameplay. The results
and to get it all running on the hardware at the limited hardware
and added cost of the SVP chip made it clear that the move to 3D would be too ambitious. Instead, Sonic 3 would keep true to the winnable 2D side-scrolling formula. They set out to give the Hedgehog one final Mega Drive outing of epic proportions. Lead gameplay designer Hirokazu Yasuhara and 2 junior game designers came up with interesting set pieces to give each zone a distinct feel in terms of gameplay. Inspiration came from the team's numerous field trips and activities. Ice Cap, for example, was inspired by the snowboarding the team did together to blow off some steam.
Oh, that's nice!
Angel Island was named after an existing location, just off the coast of San Francisco where STI was situated.
Really?
After working on 2 Sonic games off the coast of San Francisco where STI was situated.
That's a thing? Whoa.
After working on 2 Sonic games, Yasuhara really had a good grasp on how to switch up platforming action with high-speed gameplay. The added challenge this time around was to make the maps work for multiple characters with their own unique abilities. One of the new recruits on the project was Takashi Izuka, who would eventually become the lead of Sonic Team years later. He was responsible for scenes like the airship bombardment.
Because I knew about like City Escape, like SA2 being based in San Francisco. That's because that's where the actual team was.
And the opening cutscene.
And then Sonic Adventure, I think the team took a trip to the Mayan ruins, which is where they got the inspiration for the Mystic ruins. So awesome, honestly. Little details like that are awesome to me.
The game plan quickly grew and expanded to over 10 huge zones, demanding a massive 24 megabit cartridge.
Wow.
The game designers were encouraged to think big and not restrict their imagination to hardware limitations, determined that a solution would be found eventually.
Yeah.
Angel Island in particular is filled with interesting set pieces and effects. Some required clever planning. The airship, for example, would simply be too big to draw with sprites, and the lush jungle setting already fully used up the 2 background layers. The designers decided to clear one of the background layers of all trees during this scene to make room for the airship artwork. The game program altered the scroll speed and direction of this background layer mid-frame, making it possible to scroll the ground level and airship separately.
Okay.
Following up is a chase through the forest. In this scene, the sprite layer is used
They made
to add
the game
an extra
so
layer of
cinematic
trees to give it more depth.
Yeah.
This is just a small demonstration of the creative problem solving on the project. Each of the 3 main Sonic games had their own art director or lead designer, resulting in a slightly different art style per game. Naoto Oshima infused the look of the original Sonic with polygonal CGI elements and checkered patterns.
Yeah.
As a consequence of moving development of the sequel to the US, Yasushi Yamaguchi took over his role for Sonic 2. Art direction for Sonic 3 was in the capable hands of Kunitake
I like this
Aoki,
editing with the checkpoints.
an experienced designer who moved to STI early in 1992.
Okay.
After helping out on a few bits and pieces on Sonic 2, he was asked to join the Sonic 3 team right from the start. Kunitake Aoki took inspiration from the original zones, but at the same time set out to make Sonic 3 feel more modern. The look of the original Sonic was based on the clean polygonal 3D graphics from the 80s, but since then 3D imagery had advanced considerably. The art style for Sonic 3 would reflect this by adding texture and simulating more dynamic lighting. The polygonal shapes and checkered patterns were still used to keep in line with the established look. The majority of pixel art was drawn the traditional way, pixel by pixel on Sega's digitizer systems. But 3D software was starting to become a powerful tool. Various bits and pieces in Sonic 3
we
were
gotta love
created
Title
using
Tempest.
tools on Amiga, Mac, and most notably Softimage Creative Environment, running on high-end SGI systems. This 3D animation package was designed for character animation and used on movies like Jurassic Park.
Jeez. No way.
This 3D animation package was designed for character animation and used on movies like Jurassic Park.
Wow. That's crazy.
Takashi Yuda was the main animator on the project and reworked Sonic's sprites to give him a 3D touch. This became a testament of the project's 3D roots. He already showcased his animation and art skills on acclaimed titles like Castle of Illusion and Quackshot, as well as his first assigned project, Revenge of Shinobi.
Title Tempest fits really well here.
One of the biggest challenges for the art team was to come up with a fitting design for a new character.
Yup.
A doodle of dreadlocks by enemy artist Yokokawa sparked the team's imagination, and after countless meetings and sketches, Knuckles the Echidna was born. The character was given fashionable shoes with a Rastafarian color scheme
Lego
and powerful
bricks.
spiked knuckles which would
The
allow
Lego
him to
Brick
dig.
11s.
The design stemmed from the desire to make him contrast Sonic. For example, his white crescent on his chest symbolized the moon, while Sonic's round belly, the sun.
Nice.
The symbol also embodies strength, as the forceful moon bears have the same marking on their chest.
Oh, wow. Moonbear. Oh, wow.
Knuckles was appointed the guardian of Angel
Interesting.
Island and its Master Emerald. A fiendish plot by Robotnik made him believe Sonic was after this powerful emerald.
Moonbears.
In the new cutscenes, Knuckles would hinder our heroes. They telegraphed his personality as well as creating a nice scene transition.
Yeah.
The special stage of the Sonic games had quickly gained a reputation of displaying stellar effects that were once seemingly impossible on Mega Drive hardware. The development team once again set out to make a graphical feast, yet at the same time make it fun to play.
Yeah.
Yuji Naka came up with the idea of a small planet to run across after watching Dragon Ball.
Yep. There it
To
is.
realize this effect, they made a carefully constructed still image and changed its colors in a constant loop to give the illusion of movement.
Yeah.
Each square of the checkered sphere is split up in multiple lines. Each line links to
see
a
it.
different color entry in the palette. So when you offset all colors inside the palette by 1, it results in a 1-pixel shift of the checkered pattern. This clever illusion essentially makes 16 frames out of one still image, and thus didn't require much memory and CPU power. Leaving more
Nice.
resources to calculate the location of the smaller spheres. Only when Sonic changes direction, a small series of animated tiles are required. Thanks to the overwhelming success of Sonic Tuesday,
that's what intrigues me about like classic games. Is like there were so many like math and computer graphics problems to be solved since you had such limited hardware. It's so stuff like this is really like interesting to me.
Sega wanted to keep the tradition of a holiday season
like how
release
they
for their
made
Sonic
the game
games. During the
run
annual
on the
planning meeting of Sega of America at the start of '93, it already became clear that the project was behind schedule, meaning no new Sonic game for the holidays.
Nowadays with games, you just have like, you know, Unreal Engine and stuff like, you know.
Soon after, management came with a fitting solution. A smaller spin-off game inspired by the well-received Casino Night Zone of Sonic 2. One of the most promising game designers at STI, Peter Moravik, took up the challenge. Together with designer Kurt Peterson, he knocked out an animated demo with a large emphasis on pinball in mere days. The concept was quickly approved, and production began at the start of spring, and would have to wrap up roughly 5 months later.
Like the pinball
there
animation.
There were not enough resources at STI to program the game in such a short time span.
Yeah.
Roger Hector decided to outsource programming and technical management. He turned to two longtime friends with their own development company called Polygames. They set up the code for Spinball in a modular way that allowed programmers of STI to help out, tackling different sections of the game. All artwork and game design would still be produced by talent at STI who were not involved in Sonic 3. In order to hit the tight deadline,
so
the
Spinball
bulk of the code was written in a high-level programming language C. It's easier to read and manage, but the trade-off was less efficient machine code, resulting in a lower frame rate.
Yeah.
Sonic Spinball would buy the Sonic 3 project more time, but the next management challenge hit shortly after. Sega of America had made a huge promotional deal with McDonald's to coincide with the release of the game. But the ever-growing concept for Sonic 3 resulted in it slipping behind schedule. The game would not be ready until summer of '94, which would mean completely missing the promotion which was planned for February of '94. A solution to this problem came from an employee at Sega of America, who brought up the idea of a lock-on cartridge. He had seen this in action a few years prior on a small scale, allowing programmers to add new characters to an existing game.
Also, Sonic CD was Amy's debut, but all she was a damsel in distress. Do agree that Metal Sonic is a highlight of the game, though. The story wasn't really all that. It was just another classic game.
Technology made it possible to hit the deadline and release the unfinished content down the line. From that moment on, the project was split up.
Yep.
Sonic 3A would be the first half of the game.
3A.
Sonic 3B would encompass the remaining levels, and Sonic 3C was supposed to be the full experience. They knew that Knuckles was a big new selling point and was therefore reserved for Sonic 3B. His involvement in the first game would be kept to a minimum. To compensate, Sonic 3A would feature an elaborate time trial mode. The split-up was a big relief for the development team. Sonic 3A was allocated a sizable 16-megabit cartridge, meaning there was much more memory available to cram the pre-rendered title screen in the game and keep adding more detailed graphics.
That's crazy. The whole intro was just pre-rendered. It took up so much space.
Adding more memory available to cram the pre-rendered title screen in the game and keep adding more detailed graphics.
Interesting.
The huge number of zones of the complete project would call for a comprehensive score. The first two Sonic games had been composed by Nakamura of the band Dreams Come True, who had become so successful that royalties were starting to become a problem. Sega turned to its own sound team and Cube Core in Japan, consisting of almost a dozen talented musicians. A new yet familiar face would also be added to the team. Michael Jackson and Sega were already acquainted. He owned a number of their arcade cabinets and was hands-on involved in the production of his own video game, Moonwalker, 3 years prior. He helped to design the gameplay, with Al Nilsson from Sega of America serving as an intermediary. Development of the game took place at Sega of Japan. At the end of development, Yuji Naka was already working on the engine for the first Sonic game, while his colleagues next to him were finishing up Moonwalker. Many staff members on the Moonwalker project would be involved in the Sonic franchise. For example, Hiroshi Kubota, who masterfully adapted Michael's songs for the Mega Drive, would arrange and program Nakamura's songs for Sonic 1 and 2. Pixel artist Jenna Ishiwatari would draw a scene art for Sonic 1. It's no secret that Sonic Team was a big fan of Michael Jackson, and Jackson himself was a Dangerous Tour. Michael met with the team at STI and shared his interest in composing music for the mascot. Afterwards, he phoned keyboardist Brad Buxer, whom he had collaborated with on Dangerous, to help on the project. Together, they sat down and composed a number of tracks with the help of 4 other musicians and engineers. Composer Cicero Jones recalls spending countless hours on the project, making their songs suit Sonic Team's needs. Sonic 3 was not the only planned collaboration between Sega and Michael Jackson.
Maybe it was a nice cap.
The VR amusement park ride Scramble Training was already in production, and the pop star would be involved in productions from Sega's new multimedia studio.
This is Command. Who is the most qualified pilot for this emergency? Evaluating containment.
In the summer of '93, disaster struck. Rumors of child abuse hit the media, and the witch hunt began. Michael Jackson continued his hectic tour schedule for the rest of the year. During this final leg of the Dangerous Tour, Michael and Brad Buxer used one of the melodies they wrote for Sonic 3 to form the basis of the hit single Stranger in Moscow.
Really?
Sega decided to silently step away from the turmoil surrounding the pop star. Zones that originally featured Michael's music, like Marble Garden, were recomposed by Sega's own sound team. It's not unlikely that they were inspired by the work done by MJ and his team, and so they would still influence the final score and give it a unique flavor. In the end, the bulk of the score would be delivered by Sega's own team, but traces of the collaboration still ended up in the final game. Most notable is the theme for Ice Cap Zone, which clearly resembles the unreleased 80s track Hard Times from Brad Buxer's new wave band, The Jetsons.
I see. Okay, I see now. He's a composer.
Sonic 3 would not be the end of the partnership between Sega and Michael Jackson. Years later, he would pop up again in the Dreamcast game Space Channel 5 per his request. The other members in his team were less satisfied, leading to a tense situation decades later. After this hectic period for the project, Christmas of '93 rolled around and would turn out to be a Sonic-filled holiday. November 23rd was dubbed Sonic Mania Day and put the spotlight on 3 new Sonic titles: Sonic Spinball, Sonic CD, and Sonic Chaos.
Imagine streamers' reaction to this. Like, all these
marketing and communication in 1993 concerning the Hedgehog was focused on these 3 titles. Sonic Spinball could ride on the strong brand reputation and managed to sell over 1 million copies. Thanks to the mega hit Aladdin and players favoring the uncensored Mortal Kombat for the Mega Drive, it would become the 3rd strong holiday season in a row for Sega. All details concerning Sonic 3 were kept under wraps for the whole of '93. Just months before its release, Sega started to share information and beta ROMs. Gaming Press previewed the game extensively in their January and February issues of '94. Development of Sonic 3A wrapped up in late 1993 and would simply be branded as the first batch of cartridges arrived in US store shelves on the 2nd of February, just in time for promotional tie-ins and local festivities of Groundhog Day, dubbed Hedgehog Day.
Wonder how long it took them
the PAL
to make
release
this
followed
the video?
a few weeks later with various local events and promotions. Nobody outside
This is
Sega
incredible editing. Even look at the background, the rotating death egg.
knew that it was only half the game that was originally envisioned.
Like, where do you
Thanks to
get
the
those
6
assets
jam-packed
from?
zones accompanied by an elaborate time trial and 2-player mode, the game left a satisfying impression on players and press alike. All content combined would still require a 16 megabit cartridge, twice as much as Sonic 2. The cartridge would also be packed with an FE RAM
Where did you get all these assets,
saved
man?
your progress and recorded your best efforts in time trial mode without an additional battery. Sega already revealed that there would be extra content down the line, and even hinted at a possible lock-on feature that would be compatible with Sonic 1 and 2. It was seen as a positive bonus by the press, unaware that it would actually be content cut from the original game.
That's crazy.
After experiencing a successful launch
Like,
of
this
the first
B-roll is
chapter,
insane.
the team went back to work on the remaining content. The
The documentary was before the prototype music was
bulk
discovered?
of the levels were already conceptualized and even fully scored. Flying Battery Zone in particular was far in development, as it was originally intended to take part in the first act, situated between Carnival Night and Ice Cap Zone. In a transition scene, Sonic would hold on to debris from the airship and use it as a snowboard to safely slide down the hill of Ice Cap Zone. Somewhere after the split up, it was decided to move the zone to the second act.
Yeah.
Sonic 3 had not yet been released in the East. It was the intent to release the full game to the Japanese market as a single cartridge. All the new game code and assets would therefore be built on top of the already existing Sonic 3 project code. There were even minor tweaks done to the level layouts and code of Sonic 3. At the start of spring of 1994, the 6 new zones were nearing their final form. An extra final zone called Doomsday and the bonus stages were completed the next month. Pirated versions of Sonic 3 were popping up in Eastern markets, leaving Sega no choice than to release the regular Sonic 3 cartridge in May of 1994 in the East. Meanwhile, the Sonic 3B project was rebranded to Sonic & Knuckles and would be marketed as a standalone game with lock-on features, instead of just an expansion for Sonic 3. Releasing the game as a standalone title meant that extra content was needed. For example, an intro and title screen. Kunitake Aoki would again be responsible for the title screen, and had to finish this in just 2 weeks. In-house musician Howard Drawson composed some remaining bits and pieces like the opening and ending tune, as well as Knuckles' theme. By the start of June, the game was pretty much complete, and focus shifted to implementing the final lock-on functionalities. When booted up, the Sonic & Knuckles cartridge checks if there's a game attached to it. Depending on the serial number, it runs different operations through switch circuitry inside the cartridge.
Nice.
If Sonic 3 is attached, the cartridge runs the Sonic 3 and Knuckles game code. This is the 13-zone spanning complete adventure as it was originally intended, with all 3 playable characters available from the start.
Beauty.
The game program uses the new Sonic 3 level maps, but loads most graphical assets of the first 6 zones from the Sonic 3 cartridge. A new addition that was not in the original design documents are 7 Hyper Emeralds to collect. When all 14 emeralds are collected, Sonic can transform into the all-powerful Hyper Sonic, empowered with a double jump and screen-clearing move. To add even more play features, the dev team tested if they could breathe new life into Sonic 2 by making Knuckles a playable character. It turned out to be relatively simple, as the levels were already designed with a semi-flying Super Sonic in mind. But still, some minor tweaks were necessary to the level layout data to accommodate Knuckles and his climbing ability. A new build of the Sonic 2 game code was stored on an extra separate ROM chip inside the Sonic & Knuckles cartridge. The Knuckles sprite data was also stored inside this ROM. All other assets were loaded from the original Sonic 2 cartridge. There wasn't enough time and budget to give Sonic 1 the same treatment. The developers came up with a nice alternative that would even be compatible with nearly the full library of Mega Drive games. Each cartridge unlocks an extra Blue Sphere minigame level. The minigame was programmed in a way that the layouts could be procedurally generated, while the serial number of the locked-on cartridge was used as a key to generate a specific pattern. With Sonic 1 attached, the player gains access to an almost unlimited amount of Blue Sphere minigames. In the summer of '94, the almost 2-year-long development cycle of the whole project finally came to an end. Sonic & Knuckles was released worldwide in October of 1994. Like Sonic 3, it sold close to 2 million copies, which wasn't as much as the mega success of Sonic 2, but still worthy for a place in the top 10 bestsellers.
Sonic 2 went crazy.
In a perfect world, Sonic 3 and Knuckles would have been released as one game, on schedule and at normal retail price. The reality of the situation is that hardly any development environment is perfect. There's usually some struggle between various departments fighting for their own.
That's the most intriguing part, is seeing how they combated the complex problems.
As well as outside influences impacting a project. The lock-on cartridge was a creative solution to a problem, and was backed up by the drive of the developers to add as much value to both games as they could. The Sonic brand was still strong enough to pull off this trick, and leave the fans feeling satisfied with their purchase. It had been an exhilarating road to success for Sega for 3 years, but turmoil from inside started to grow. STI would still be able to release 2 original games in the spirit of their company, Comic Zone and The Ooze. In '95, it stopped being a separate entity, and was merged with the other US-based development studios of Sega. The free creative spirit was unfortunately lost, as it became more structured and corporate-oriented. Yuji Naka and Hirokazu Yasuhara both left STI shortly after the Sonic & Knuckles project, and went their separate ways working on vastly different franchises. They continued to inspire and even teach future generations of game developers. As for Sonic and Sega, their fairy tale story to unmatched fame and success had come to an end. Their rise to the top would become one of the most memorable stories in gaming history. Although their fame would never hit that high point again, their products, both old and new, would still bring joy to a new generation of players.
Indeed. That was nice. You need a new Knights game? Yes. Probably not gonna happen anytime soon, but yeah. That'd be cool. Nice. That was really nice. Why is this the most replayed part? Big thanks to... Okay. Nice. Why is this the most replayed part? The credits. La, 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 la. Y'all know how I feel about that Hydro City Act 2. Or the credits. Nice. Hey. Nice. Yeah, this is the Mania version. Someone must have really liked the credits. That's funny.
Yeah, it's funny how it tends to go. One day destroy half the moon, then that's where you vote. 3 days left, you gotta roll. Now there's blood, don't eat your soul. Let me switch it up. Free Melee, we ain't Nintendo. Rise and shine. Call myself someone one of the last. Make other trainees, we're having a blast. Balance the stream in the cart. One's gonna crash.